Yeah, so I guess to kick us off, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have so many of the coordinating committee and so many of the community of practice to join us in our first webinar for 2024. What is slightly embarrassing since it is already end of May. It's late for something that is the first of a year, but we've been busy with a million things that we're gonna talk to you about on this call. What we have planned for the next, I don't know, half an hour or so is a mix of telling you a little bit about us and hearing from you guys. Want to take this opportunity to introduce my wonderful colleagues who join me on the community practice coordinating team, and share with you a little bit about what we are trying to do and how we're going about it, where we have gotten to so far, and then want to talk a little bit about what we do to support our community of practice, and equally to talk about how you can get involved, how you can contribute, and how you can steer what we're doing. So that's the outline for the next half an hour, 45 minutes. Please feel always free to bump in, ask questions or anything. We are trying to keep this as interactive as possible. So to kick us off, to give you an idea where everyone is located, and not all of us are on the call today because for some of us it is hopefully early still. I just thought I'll introduce our coordinating committee and kick off with our most recent addition to our committee, Joanne Griffin. Joanne is based on the East Coast of Australia, in the very north. Joanne is a all-color lady, and yeah, it's a bit early on her side, and she has to bring the kids and get the kids ready. Then we have, starting from my, I guess, west, being based in Australia, Marina already introduced herself. She's calling in from Vancouver Island. Melanie Harding is unfortunately not joining us today. She's on well-earned holidays, and Melanie would be based in Yellowknife. Gustavo already introduced himself. Gustavo is based in Brazil, and he would be normally joined by Valentina, who is, I think, currently in Europe, but originally from Colombia. Anne introduced herself, even if she's calling in from Zambia today. Anne is normally based in Cameroon. We have Daniel Oates. For him, again, it is a very awkward time. It would be 5 a.m. in the morning. Daniel is in Western Australia. Yeah, then we have Joanne as well in Australia. And last but not least, Natalina, who's calling in from Timor-Leste, and Lavanita, who is calling in from Borneo in Indonesia. Malaysia, my bad. And me, finally, I'm based in Melbourne, where it is a very normal 7:20 in the morning. So not too late, not too early for me. The benefit of setting up Zoom webinars, you can set them up at times that work for you. And I'll quickly just tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll hand over to my wonderful colleagues for an introduction. I'm coordinating this wonderful group of people and this community. As I said earlier, I'm calling in from the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Australia, in the state of Victoria, and there in the far south on the coast. I'm an independent consultant, but for the purpose of this call. I'm the coordinator of the Community of Practice. I've been around the Conservation Coaches Network traps for some time. I was involved with a dear colleague of mine, Stuart Cowell, in developing the first adaptation of the conservation standards in Australia in 2008, 2010. And during that time became a conservation standards and a healthy country planning practitioner. A little bit later, I became a conservation coach and then as well a coach trainer about 11 years ago. Aside from my role as a coordinator for the CoP Indigenous CS Projects, I'm sitting as well in a regional network of the CCNet for Australia, Aotearoa, and they are a coordinating committee member for some 10 years, I think, by now. And yeah, started off the CoP from being involved in CCNet, and I'm very happy to see it grow to something so beautiful now. And with that, I want to hand over to Lavanita and say a little more words about your role in CCNet. And why are you getting up at 5 in the morning?
I was forced. No, just kidding. I love I'm old. I told Frank I'm old. That's why I get up very early in the morning. Anyways, I'm Lavanita again. I'm currently based in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Malaysia. I'm working with Dabidan Malaysia. I'm the lead for the planning, development, and monitoring unit. So I'm actually a newbie in this as a coordinating committee member. I was approached by Frank last year. Was it last year, Frank? Just late last year, no? Yeah. But I'm also the co-lead for the CCNet Southeast Asia Regional Network. And I've been a coach since 2013. I was trained by, I think it was John Morrison who came over and has been with, affiliated to the CCNets ever since. Yeah, I've just been trained as a coach trainer last year when we conducted the coach training for Southeast Asia. And yeah, that's a very interesting experience, but yes. What else do I do? I think that's about it, no, Frank?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want to share with us.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'll pass it to, I think the next one in line would be Gustavo. Yeah.
Thanks, Lavanita. Well, hello again. I'm Gustavo. As I said before, I'm based in south of Brazil. As well as Frank, I'm also an independent consultant, and I do my work through a small consultancy firm called Conserve Brazil. I'm currently based in the outskirts of Curitiba, which would be Quatro Barras, is the name of the municipality in the Atlantic Forest. And since last year, I've been part of the coordinating committee of this community of practice. But I also co-lead for a while now the Latin America regional for CCNet. And I've been in love by the conservation standards since 2009, when I was using it as a practitioner and also learning about it for the first time. And then after a while, I was trained by Christina Lash and Anita Diedrichsen and Rogério as a conservation coach. That was in 2014. And from that time on, I was frequently trying to engage with this community, which I consider to be a very good way to use your time so that we as a group can really make a difference. So I've been involved in the updates and the new revisions of the new versions of the conservation standards. I've been translating the conservation standards to Portuguese, and I'm also in love by Miradi, and I also volunteer in the Miradi team as a translator as well to Portuguese. I mean, that was in the time when Miradi depended on the language packs. Nowadays, it's much more simple with all those automatic translations that are really working much better now. So, well, I think that's this. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. And as I always like to emphasize, I've been here in this community trying to give a hand, but mostly learning from the experience of so many experienced professionals. So it's a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the introduction, Gustavo. Next one, well, we have to take over the introduction for Valentina because she's not able to join today. Valentina joined the CoP as well during a project we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And Valentina is from Bogota in Colombia and has worked there with indigenous communities in a few watersheds as a consultant working with the Nature Conservancy a few years ago. And since then, she's just at the moment in Europe studying over there, but returning back to Colombia later in the year. And yeah, I think the bottom parts are, I think, copied across from Gustavo's profile. I don't think they are correct. Not sure. Okay. And with that, I would love to hand over to Anne to give you a chance to tell us more about your role and what you're doing.
Hello again. I'm Antongo. I don't know if you can hear me because it's breaking at one point. You go off and then back again. So I don't know if that's the same thing you're getting from my end. So I am the PML advisor for WWF Cameroon. I'm based in Yaoundé. I'm also a SIC member. You know, I'm part of the committee, and then I'm also the lead for CCNet Western Central Africa, and I was trained as a coach since 2007, reinforced in 2014 by John Morrison and a team of others, and yeah, so that's me. I'm just giving it briefly because I'm doubting if you're even getting me. The network is not very good yet.
Thank you, Anne. We can hear you perfectly. And it's wonderful that you call in while you are at another workshop somewhere else in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll introduce Joanne to everyone because she's not on this call. So as I mentioned earlier, Joanne is from Cape York in Australia on the very far east coast. Joanne is a all-color traditional owner, and she got introduced to healthy country planning as a traditional owner working on the healthy country plan for her own group. And she's these days a healthy country planning manager at Bush Heritage Australia, what is an Australian NGO, environmental NGO that has many partnership projects with Indigenous groups helping Indigenous people in Australia look after their country and protect their traditional lands. And Joanne is our newest addition to the CoP. She only joined a few months back to support Daniel. And yeah, she started planning in 2016 with her own group and then became a healthy country planning practitioner in 2023. And with that, I would love to hand over to you, Natalino.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon again for everyone. So I'm Natalino Babo Martins. I'm from Timor-Leste. I'm working for Conservation International in Timor-Leste as a deputy project manager for the project is funded by Global Environment Facility. So the project is about watershed management, and then I also helping the government to introduce the two protected area using the what they call I forget in English, but conservation standard. So we help the government to establish the two national protected area in Timor-Leste. So it is the short introduction from me, and then I'm happy to join again this team. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natalino. And in particular, because Natalino gotten up super early to be on this call today. So much appreciated your passion for our committee. And with that, I would like to hand over to Marina.
Thank you. Hi again, everyone. I just will keep it short, but basically I first got introduced to healthy country planning also from Stuart Cowell, getting a better understanding of what this was in Australia, what happened there, and thinking about that in the Canadian context. So I did a little bit of that through my work, but also because I am an Indigenous person from Canada, thinking about that from that perspective and how it could be applied in this context. So in my spare time, I volunteer a lot of my time to look at and support different committees within the Métis Nation community. So looking at things like climate change, preparedness, emergency preparedness, food sovereignty, and how those link into health and well-being. And then, of course, looking at how we can do a little bit better when it comes to project planning. So of course, the conservation standards are a great resource for that, but healthy country planning is even better when it's grounded in those different Indigenous ways of being and knowing. So for me, that's really what spurred my interest in this group. Again, trying to make use of best practices and lessons learned and apply that so that it can help out not just my community, but other communities across what is now Canada, but more broadly Turtle Island. So that's just a little bit about me, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Wonderful. So good to see you, Marina. And I jump in and introduce that fella, Daniel Oates. He would be calling in from Australia's west coast. He's in the very far north out there. Daniel is a Badi Chabi traditional owner and is as well the land and sea manager for the Kimberley Land Council, which is a Aboriginal representative body in Australia. And Daniel is in the conservation standards fold for a long time. I was very glad starting the journey with him in 2010 when we were working together in the same part of the world. So yeah, he's been around the traps for 14 years. Unfortunately, it's very early for him today. It's 5:30 over in Western Australia right now. And last but not least, Melanie, who is on holidays today. Melanie is the planning coordinator for the Satu Renewable Resource Board. She would be based in Yellowknife, Canada. And Melanie's been around CCNet as well for quite some time. Satu Renewable Resource Board have created their own adaptation of the conservation standards called Planning for the Future. And she's quite busy in the northwest of Canada. Yeah, that is our board and the wonderful people I'm lucky to engage with. To give you an idea quickly what we're doing. So we are in the conservation standards world, we are a thematic network, and the CoP Indigenous CS project works in particular, how the name suggests, with Indigenous communities. And as Marina already mentioned in her introduction, we want to increase and access the support for Indigenous people in local communities in using best practice planning tools. And we strongly believe that the conservation standards and adaptations of the conservation standards are one of those tools to help foster an increased involvement and leadership of Indigenous people and local communities in planning conservation initiatives on their lands. We want to support and catalyze effective conservation on Indigenous land that are led by Indigenous people through good planning, coaching teams, sharing knowledge and sharing innovations, what is underlying, I guess, the mission of the broader CCNet as well. And we want to facilitate and encourage that people can use relevant adaptations of the conservation standards for better environmental, cultural and social outcomes amongst Indigenous people and local communities. As such, we are trying to have an active and representative CoP that supports Indigenous people globally by developing or accessing relevant adaptations. And you may have gathered it when we did our introductions. We are a representative. We're trying to be as representative as possible and have CoP coordinating members from all of the regions and parts of the world that we're engaging in, because those people in the regions are the people that hold the knowledge. We have a very bold goal, and that is by 2030, and the time 2030 comes from this big global initiative 30 by 30. We want to see that 100 new projects of Indigenous people and local communities in the Americas, Africa, and Asia will use relevant adaptations of the conservation standard. And how we got into that goal, I'm going to talk to you about in a second when we're introducing the last project we got engaged in. We want that people have access to relevant adaptations. And I've been using that phrase a few times now. With relevant adaptations, we mean adaptations that are culturally and regionally relevant to Indigenous people. In Australia, we had a wonderful success story with healthy country planning, and that was an adaptation that was developed and championed by Indigenous people in Australia. It's a huge success. More than 20% of our national resource system is covered by healthy country plans, but that is an Australian adaptation. And we would love to see similar stories occur in other parts of the world as well. Gustavo did some similar work with a colleague of his in Chile, where they adapted the conservation standards for communities, for coastal communities in Chile. And similar, Valentina, when she was working with Indigenous groups in Colombia, were adapting the conservation standards for the specific context there. And as I mentioned earlier, Melanie is doing the same thing with the Satu Renewable Resource Board in Canada. So for us, it is important that there are locally relevant adaptations that we would like to support people to develop and share. And as we are a network, we believe that we all can learn a lot from each other. So we're creating this network to be a platform for sharing and learning amongst Indigenous people and equally non-Indigenous people, for example, like myself, who work exclusively with Indigenous people throughout their career, and with the aim to do better conservation. And ultimately, we would like to see way more Indigenous people involved in CCNet and become coaches and practitioners and support their own communities and their peers and neighbors. So that's a little bit what we are trying to do as the CoP. And I thought I'll give you, before I hand over and hear from you guys a little bit more, give you a quick timeline on how the story started. It's been some time by now. As I said when I introduced myself, I got involved in CCNet when we developed the first adaptation of the conservation standards here in Australia in a project with the Wunamagambra traditional owners in the far northwest, where I had the luck to collaborate and work together with Stuart Cowell. When this first adaptation came about, we were the odd ones out, and we kind of introduced this concept of adapting the conservation standards for use with Indigenous people in 2010 at a CCNet rally in Santa Cruz. For those of you who are new to CCNet, every 2 years we're trying to hold an international meeting where like-minded people and conservation standard nerds are coming together to talk about all things conservation standards. So in 2010, we introduced this concept of adapting the conservation standard. We did, to get to the point of the healthy country planning is now, we worked for quite some time to get everything right. We had to adjust the language and work with a board of Indigenous people to help us make sure that we got everything right from an Indigenous Australian point of view. We spend a fair bit of time on creating training resources like PowerPoint slides and manuals and everything to document how healthy country planning works in Australia. And while we did this, healthy country planning, as I mentioned earlier, grew a lot in Australia. The methodology was included in some government guidelines for Indigenous protected areas, or they're called in other parts of the world ICAs, Indigenous Community Conserved Areas. And when they got introduced into those guidelines in Australia, it spread like a wildfire across the north and more as well into the south of Australia. That by now in 2023, or well, last year, we had more than 60 healthy country plans in Australia. Yeah, that little map thumbnail is a snapshot in 2016, how healthy country planning developed. So we did a lot of training. We were lucky in the first 3 years to get some support funding from the Nature Conservancy to run 3 training courses to push people from being a practitioner through to a coaching state. That was from 2010 to 2014 or 2011 to 2014. And from that, I guess more and more people got familiarized with the adaptation and started using it in Australia. And since then, yearly there are healthy country planning training courses as well held in Australia in different places to grow our community of people there. And then, sorry, this doesn't look so nice on the screen. In 2018, we finally moved into becoming a part of the Conservation Coaches Network. And we established in 2018 at a CCNet rally in the Blue Mountains in Australia, the Community of Practice Indigenous Conservation Standards Projects. As you all know, afterwards, shortly after came the pandemic. Our next big meeting that was meant to be in 2020 in Canada was gotten postponed because we were all locked down and couldn't travel. Instead, we held a virtual rally and held there a webinar to introduce the community of practice and start growing our network. And because we are purely volunteer driven until now, and we have to rely a lot on things like webinars and electronic things to create a community, because it's cheap and cost effective and within our means. And then in 2022, we were very lucky of working together with the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and the Walton Family Trust in a project that is facilitated, or that was facilitated, by Foundation of Success, the organization that Jacqueline is representing on this call. And as such, the CoP was part of a learning network that was trying to establish and look into and the mechanics behind scaling conservation initiatives. We all hear it around the world in catchy news stories. We want to increase this by X amount percent, and we want to achieve this by this year. There's all those big statements about where we want to go. But often there's not certainty around how do we get to those scaling goals and those increased targets. And this learning network helped us over a year and a half to look into the mechanics behind scaling together with 5 other projects, and then present on those learnings at 2 conferences in Kigali, in Rwanda, in August, where Anne attended, and then later at the Society of Ecological Restoration conference in Darwin that Gustavo and Marina attended. We have on our YouTube channel as well a video specifically about the scaling project and some nifty tools that Foundation of Success developed based on this project. And yeah, that brings us to now a phase of continuing to grow and to consolidate the CoP. This year we've launched our charter, we developed our strategic plan, and developed more of a structure around our decision making so that we can start as well growing the activities that we're doing and becoming more present and being able to do more with more people. I'm not sure if there is, before I jump to the next slide, if there's anything from my coordinating committee members to add. All right, then let's have a look how we operate, and then I will stop talking soon and hear rather from you to find out what we can do and share a few ideas. So I mentioned early on that we're trying to be as representative as possible. Our coordinating committee members come from the different regions that we are operating and that Indigenous people are working in and leading conservation initiatives. I'm trying to support our coordinating committee members as the coordinator, and we base our work on a charter that we developed that you can access when you look at our homepage, and we developed as well a strategic plan that spells out a little bit the things we're doing. Because Indigenous conservation and leadership in Indigenous conservation is definitely a very complex and what I'd call a wicked issue, and that is tied to so many different aspects that all came into play since colonialization. We have embraced the approach of collective impact, and we totally see that we cannot achieve what we're trying to achieve without the support of others. So we invite collective impact partners, groups, people, organizations that work on a similar issue to join us as collective impact partners, to collaborate and to assist us and to inform us about opportunities. In our charter, we are currently as well, in our structure, we're currently as well recruiting for more new coordinating committee members. Anne is at the moment the representative for Central and West Africa, and we have only one representative in Africa, and we're looking to grow the team in Africa and find for Anne a collaborator for East Africa as well. So there's currently an opening up for a role there, and if people are interested, they can just send us an email and let us know about and nominate themselves to join the CoP. And in a similar fashion, we're looking at the moment as well for 2 representatives for the Pacific Island nations, recognizing that there is a large chunk of land and water that is currently not represented, but where Indigenous people play a crucial role in looking after the coastal and marine resources. So if you are from a Pacific Island nation and you would like to join, same way, please get in touch with us or spread the word and join this wonderful group of people. And that brings us to, now we introduced everyone who is on the board, and we talked about our structure. What is it that we're doing? And that's the last part before handing over to all of you. So, as I said, we are currently a volunteer-driven network. So hence we have limited resources. We do most our things in the meantime electronically. We have a email address to get in touch with everyone on the coordinating committee. If we get emails in there, I will forward it to the private emails of everyone involved so that you can get in touch with a representative from your region. We're running as well an email listserv that is very similar to the Conservation Coaches Global Listserv, only that it is, I guess, with a thematic focus on the indigenous issues. If you want to join the listserv, you can send us an email and say so, and then you will be, then you will become part of a group and can send emails to everyone by sending your emails at a distribution email address, what's called CC Indigenous Projects at npogroups.org. But we'll give you all introductions and instructions of how you can use the listserv when you sign up. I find it is a very useful tool to stay in touch because you reach a good number of people. I think at the moment there's 270 or so of us subscribed to the listserv, so it's a good way of spreading news. For example, like Gustavo did during my night or in his morning when he shared a position opening. So I can only reiterate, if you are part of this community, use the listserv and share opportunities, ask questions. That's what it's there for. It's a simple way of connecting you with people that you don't run into in an easy way because they are spread across the entire world. We have as well a homepage, a Google site that we developed. And I think, Lavenita, you are putting probably, you're already done. Wonderful. There's a link in the chat as well. On our homepage, you can find news, but in particular, you can find all the different resources that we have developed and that we want to share with the world. So on our homepage in the resource library, you can find case studies from around the world in 5 different languages that we were able to develop as part of our learning network work. There are regional reports about how indigenous people use the conservation standards in different parts of the world. There are peer-reviewed articles, presentations, all kind of different stuff. We are trying to have this as an online container for everyone to share information. So if you have an amazing resource that you developed as part of your work and you are authorized to share it with other people, we would love to hear from you and host it on our homepage. In the same way, send us an email and we're more than happy to post it online and share it with everyone. And on our homepage, we're having, I call it a cheap version of a yellow page directory, a Google map where we ask people to locate their projects and any information about the projects that they're working on to help indigenous people from around the world to find suitable examples in their geography. So when you go to our homepage, and all of those little yellow stars on the map, there is a little profile on a project. There are some contact details if you want to get in touch directly with someone to hear about it. And if there is a case study that has been developed, there are all the case study information there as well. Same as with all the other things, if you feel you want to connect with people and you have a project that you would like to portray, please join us on our COP map so that we can get you in touch with and connect you to Indigenous people and local communities from around the world. And surprise, we're running webinars like the webinar today and a few others that we have planned later on in the year. To hear about our webinars, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We post about them on our homepage and we notify people through our email listserv. Webinars, as we mentioned earlier, is just a really cheap way, aside from time, to get people together, because we unfortunately are not funded to fly us all to beautiful places in the world for now. You can join as well our YouTube channel, or follow our YouTube channel, where we post a back catalogue of all the previous webinars we held. So I think again, and it's probably in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Lavenita. Yeah, find us on YouTube and follow us there. But it's not only about us presenting to you. The idea is as well that we support you in running your own webinars. If you think that you have a great idea that is about how Indigenous people and local communities use the conservation standards. So if you want any support in organizing it, promoting it, and running it or whatsoever, please get in touch with us. And we are community supported, so we are only as good as the contribution of every individual of our community of practice. And yeah, with that, I would like to stop talking so much and rather hear another time from you about ideas, topics, things that you would like us to do. And this should be a two-way pathway. So Lavenita, I think, is sharing again, or has shared already, the link to this page, and that we're currently, wait a second, share, that we're seeing. We have, again, very simple slide with a few ideas and post-it notes. If you got a webinar idea that you reckon we should talk about and you want to edit, if you hear about an upcoming opportunity, or if you have something that you would like us to support you with, jot it down in those little post-it notes and give us, if you can, maybe your contact details that we can follow up in case it is something we need to follow up with. But please use this opportunity and chime in. And if you don't want to write, or if you have issues accessing this slide, you can as well just talk, and I shall shut up for now and let you guys share ideas and think. Over to you guys. Gustavo, can I assume that you have written about the CCNet rally in Chile?
No, actually, it wasn't me, but I'm glad to see it there.
Very good. Whoever wrote the Valdivia rally post-it notes, can that person maybe say a few words and introduce it to all of us?
Well, that was me, and I just saw, I think the email went out in the last couple of days, announcing that the CCNet rally would be in Valdivia, Chile, in March 2025. And so what does that represent in terms of an opportunity? Well, it could be a way for some of us to connect in person. Could be a way for us to workshop an idea or a project, or to put on a training for folks that are interested in learning about some of these adaptations. Yeah, it could be a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And I do agree. It's a wonderful opportunity, and there is at the moment as well geographically in Chile a lot of stuff happening using the conservation standards with indigenous people. There is a few new people subscribing to our community and we're doing interesting work down there. Previously at CCNet rallies, we always were able to run I guess you can call it a indigenous streams of topics. So we ran three or four different topics at the last CCNet rally in Victoria as the CoP. And we do hope, it's still early days for the Valdivia rally, so we haven't started much planning yet in regards to the themes and everything. But we are, we're preparing and ramping up. So in the next few months, I'm sure that all of you will get more emails if you want to participate in a session, support a session, and things like that, to get involved. And we will keep everyone posted through our listserv. Someone else, and let's say I assume that could have been Jacqueline, wrote about the ICCB conference in Australia in 2025.
Yeah, it was great to have some representation at the last ICCB, and since there's been such a foundation in healthy country planning in Australia, I'm excited for it to be even more of a part of ICCB, and hopefully build the partnership that CCNet and that the Conservation Measures Partnership are trying to grow with Society for Conservation Biology. So yeah, looking forward to that next year. And also just put a few more notes in the chat about the CCNet rally, working with Christina to coordinate that. So please feel free to reach out with any questions.
Terrific. Thanks, Jacqueline. Do you know whether you guys will be present at the ICCB in 2025? There been already a decision made?
Still early days, like you said. I know that CMP will have some representation. FOS, I assume that we will have some representation, at least a few folks. I guess it just depends on what the topics will be, and maybe we could have some early planning to try and do something joint.
Do you have a date for the rally, for the conference?
It's in June. Let me put the link in the chat.
Yeah, we'll have a look. There is as well, still not finally confirmed. We, the CoP, will hopefully attend the Wild 12 conference. And I'm very glad that John is on this call, because he gotten us onto the conference and mentioned it a while ago. And the Wild 12 conference is from the Wild Foundation, a big gathering that is held all 2 years around the world, and the next one will be in the Dakotas in North America, and we've been accepted with our presentation, but we are still waiting to get confirmation whether they can provide us with some travel support. So we will hopefully be in August at that conference as well, and present on the CoP there and the conservation standard. Can I maybe ask someone who filled out any of the other post-it notes to talk about them. I know that I'm pretty sure Lavanita wrote about adaptations in Malaysia and Borneo.
Yeah, you mentioned that we do have adaptations for the conservation standards for IPLCs relevant to the North America, South America, and also Australia. I was wondering if there's a chance or possibility to have the same, work on adaptations for IPLCs for Southeast Asia. We can start with Malaysia since I may have control over that for now. So, I mean, not control, but then since through WWF Malaysia, and we do have a lot of, most of our projects definitely involve IPLCs in it. And I think it's good to have this type of adaptations, although we do use the open standards or TPMS as we know it within our organization. But yeah, I think that's a huge, great demand for us to be more inclusive, and doing so, having an adaptation of the CS to CS for IPLCs would be really beneficial for not only our organization, but the partners that we work with in our projects. Yeah. So if there's any possibility to do that, it's just an idea. So something to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Lavanita. I think that is a great idea, and we're more than happy, and that applies to all the different geographies in the world, to help support creating local or regional adaptations. So more than happy to see whether we can find through our contacts some funding, because I guess a lot of that is always based on having the resources to bring people together and to create materials and then test and refine those materials. But that sounds definitely like a good idea. Let's continue this conversation and see whether we can make something happen for that part of the world. It's definitely long overdue. I'm not sure who wrote about the webinar ideas, about the case studies of how the conservation standards are applied.
That was me. That's because I remember, I'm not sure if it was in Blue Mountains or other occasion, that was super nice to see like examples of the conservation standards adaptations being really applied, and what was good, what was hard, and to really land on some sort of reality that can reflect what perhaps other people will face when using or adapting the conservation standards as well. So I think it's a very rich opportunity to get in touch with other people's expertise in using one of the adaptations. So I always enjoy learning about other projects or people's projects.
Yes, thanks, Gustavo. And this is kind of, it will be on our next slide. We're trying to do this with the case studies we've developed last year. We have in late June a webinar that we're running, and we haven't set a date yet, to look at how the Sami in Finland and Sweden, like the case study is actually out of Sweden, but the traditional lands of the Sami stretch a bit further, how the Sami in Sweden have used the conservation standards to overcome a land use conflict between tourism and reindeer herding in Sweden. And later in August, I think we will hear from our colleagues in Ecuador and Colombia about how they have used healthy territory planning, a adaptation of the conservation standards that combines the conservation standards with TNC's VCA network in Ecuador and Colombia, and how that has been applied on a watershed level there. So yes, we are doing that and trying to make more of those webinars happen. And then somebody put in a note about knowledge exchanges. The person is still on the call.
Yeah, that was me again, and that was just you know, I guess the emphasis really there, because it's maybe a bit similar to what Gustavo added, but the emphasis being on hearing from the Indigenous peoples and local communities, as opposed to us who are kind of professional planners. So maybe more of an emphasis on community members, planners from communities. And you know, kind of how they have worked with these adaptations and what the outcomes have been. Certainly, like in all of the work that I have done in Canada, that is what communities want to know about. They have, you know, some interest in hearing from me, but like gathering Indigenous peoples, you know, even if it's just on a webinar, as I have done a few times, is really powerful. So that might be something that the community of practitioners could take on too.
Thanks, Heather. And yeah, I totally agree with you. Like nothing beats a first-hand experience. Within Australia, we've been lucky to have had some sort of support sometimes to do exchanges, but in particular, like exchanges across continents have proven to be difficult, but it's definitely something we've heard beforehand as well, and something where we're trying to see whether we can raise funds in the future to create more opportunities for South by South exchange trips between Indigenous
Yeah, and
people.
I wasn't even thinking in person, although that would be amazing. Even just virtually has been really powerful as well. So just have to figure out time changes.
Indeed. Cool. Is there anything else that you would like to bring up right now? I realize that we are already a few minutes over the prescribed time for our webinar, and that is a common thing when you attend webinars that I coordinate, that we're always running over time. I apologize deeply. But yeah, if there is nothing else from your side, let me just jump across to our last slide. To them. So thanks everyone for joining, and that was wonderful to see my fellow coordinating committee members and a few of you guys from the community of practice on this webinar. If you want to keep staying in touch, sign up to our email listserv to find out about what's happening, what we are offering, and to connect with people. Please follow us on LinkedIn. We're posting, I guess, the smaller news bits and other opportunities on our LinkedIn profile. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have 2 upcoming webinars in June and August. While we have been slack with webinars early in the year, we are stepping on the accelerator now towards the center of the year. And we're going to hear in June from our dear colleague Daniel Wolfatz how the Sami in Sweden used this conservation standards to bridge a gap between sustainable tourism development and reindeer herding. And then later on from Carolina Polina and Gabriela Celli, and we hear about how healthy territory planning has been applied in Ecuador and Colombia. And as I mentioned earlier, we have recorded this call and we will post this call later today on our YouTube channel. For those of you who couldn't join us, and share a recording via LinkedIn and our homepage. And yeah, I guess that's from me right now. I'll open it up to any one of you if you have any last comments or anything that you want to share.
Just to say thanks, and it was a real pleasure to meet you all here, and we hope to see everyone connected somehow to our community, even if it's attending webinars or really engaged in the community. but it's like the more people engaged we have, the more the whole community will benefit and every member as a consequence. So stay in contact, and it will be a pleasure to share with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Gustavo. John, while you're still on the call, will you be at the Wild 12 conference in August?
Not planning to right now.